All right, good afternoon, Jamf Nation. Hi, everybody. Everybody enjoying day one of JNUC so far? Awesome, awesome. Well, hey, we got a great session here. Marty and Ray from Ohio State are going to talk to you about how they're scaling and simplifying their mobile device management. So without further ado, here they are. One note for housekeeping, we're going to keep all the questions to the end. We have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. If you have a question, simply raise your hand. I'll be coming around the room with the microphone. That way our friends who are attending virtually can be able to hear your question. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, Adam. Appreciate it. So I'm Marty Wenders. As mentioned, I'm the Director of Client Engineering. So my team runs the Jamf services, the Jamf platform. Here with me is Ray DeMay, our Senior Endpoint Engineer. He's also the Jamf Administrator. So the history of Jamf at Ohio State really started with a purposeful deployment is interesting that's being discussed here because it all started with something we call digital flagship, which led to shared Jamf. So back in 2017, 2018, we started the largest one-to-one deployment that we had, which was every student. Unfortunately, it since has shut down, but it led to what we call shared Jamf, which is the vision of we developed one Jamf platform. Now, we had 15 different departments running their own Jamf servers, and we were actually, the central IT organization was running LANDesk. And my CIO came to me and said, hey, you feel good running that with 10,000 iPads at a time? I'm like, no way. And so they said, well, stand this up. So within 6 months, we stood it up. But she also came to me with the mentality of make it something that other people will want to use. So it wasn't a mandate. What we built wasn't a mandate. It was build it, make it available to others, and what it can look like. So 15 different Jamf servers, 6,000 Macs in it, 12,000 mobile devices is where we are now. So Ray is here with me. He's our Senior Endpoint Engineer. We're going to lead you through that journey, the things that we did right, the things that we did wrong. Some of you we've talked to in the past, and some of the things that we've had to do from that. But as we said, while digital flagship didn't last after COVID, which again, we'll talk about qualitative, quantitative data. Get that quantitative data so you can talk about your return on investment with the product and what it's doing, because we had a lot of qualitative, and when you're spending that much money, your leadership has to see those types of things. So unfortunately, we don't still have our one-to-one, but we have a shared environment that's allowing us to use that. So as we mentioned, the basics of it, each customer gets one site with some rare exceptions. Our marching band, best damn band in the land, it has its own site. So we have some students maintaining that. There's 3 tiers of access, and I'm going to turn it over to Ray. You're going to hear a lot from Ray. I'm here from a leadership perspective. I can tell you the history, what all happened, but Ray's going to be the one that's going to tell you all the fun stuff. So go ahead, Ray.
Thanks, Marty. So how the shared Jamf service works is we build a site for each customer, and what we've settled on are 3 tiers of access. 2 of them are native Jamf access. One is administrator for the sites. You have God mode in your own site. But what we've also done with that through some technology that I'll talk about in a little bit is they also have top-level Jamf access to upload packages, upload scripts, and they also have some read-only into other sites to look at how people build configuration profiles. The keyword in this is shared. So this is not only just shared access and a shared platform, but it's shared information. We do a limited role, which is for some of the bigger units that may have desktop support help desk that's not, they might have a tier 1, tier 2 split or something. So this is more of as Jamf's using CRUD permissions, this is CRU without the D. So they could create smart groups, static groups, they can update inventory, but they can't delete anything. And then auditor permissions for security, for managers, things like that. And then if a unit wants it, we'll create an API account. Typically, we've done a read-write and a read-only account for those units who want one. And the big thing is that it's a self-service access management setup. So if you have a site, if you're a site administrator, you also own the groups that are used to manage that Jamf access. We use Active Directory groups that tie into in-common grouper, group management. that then ties into the SAML. We use Shibboleth for single sign-on for Jamf. So the Jamf access is based off of the groups in common grouper, which are based off of Active Directory groups, which are fed by ServiceNow. So this is the request form that site admins can use, and there's 4 different ones. You can request access as a user that is approved by the site owner, or there's usually a secondary person who's also a point of contact. You can also request to be removed, or the app owners, the group owners, can do the removals or additions on their own. So this is what the self-service piece of access management in Shared Jamf looks like. And like I said, the in-common grouper piece plays that middleman, translating the 80 groups that are populated by this form into the SAML groups. And then Marty could probably go on for a long time about Apple School Manager, but there's also an Apple School Manager component to this, where the site admins are given device enrollment manager privileges, because what we've decided on is no device should go into Shared Jamf and not be managed. So but it needs to be autonomous, so they don't need to come to us every time they need a device reassigned properly. So they get Content Manager in a location in ASM, so that allows them to do the VPP stuff that they need to do. And they get the access to be able to assign or reassign devices. Marty and I are the only administrators, so we're the only ones that can release devices. That's the only protection right now that we have. And to make sure that we have that, no device gets into a site, an unmanaged state, we've created a site in Jamf that we call unmanaged, or unassigned rather, that we've broken enrollment on. So I basically have an enrollment customization that you can't complete, is how we've done it. So that's the pop-up on an iPad that would come up if it's in that unassigned state. If it's not properly assigned to a location in Apple School Manager, when somebody tries to enroll a device, they will get to this point that says it's an unassigned device, you can't go any further than this, talk to your IT, and then the device has to be wiped to remove that enrollment caching once it's fixed in Apple School Manager, and then the device can be enrolled into their site.
Yeah, and what we did, and the reason we did that, you only get one default site, right, when you're going from School Manager. So we have actually 15 different sites that something can enroll into. So since we couldn't say everything's going into this site, when it comes in from Apple School Manager, it's always going to that one unless we've moved it. So that was our way to get around the capability of unassigned, because Apple has not made it where you can assign to multiple, or say point it from your caching or your register system or through that. So we've done it by doing this type of policy.
And there are multiple MDMs involved. The Shared Jamf model does not cover 100% of Ohio State University. There's one unit that does have their own on-premises Jamf instance, and the medical center has some parts of the medical center are still on Workspace ONE. So Ohio State has a single Apple School Manager that is servicing 3 MDMs, but really more because each site has an MDM token in there. So it's a complicated setup, but so far we've only had one situation where every single device in Apple School Manager got reassigned. So September 27th, 2002 was not a day that I look fondly upon. That's you.
Oh, yeah. So cost savings, we were on-prem at first, and so that was one of our pieces that we did move up. So we were spending a lot because we did an S3 Amazon when we were on-prem. We went Jamf Cloud, and no egress costs. So, that really helped us move forward with Jamf Cloud. I will say our migration to the cloud was not perfect. We had a lot of problems with it. Ray can share some of those that we had to end up doing. But then our model is that central IT organization ourselves, we buy all of the licenses. So we aggregate it. Ray will share how he pulls that together. And then we buy it, and we share that cost share all of those out. So it does lead to savings for the university because we are sharing all of those costs. We can buy at scale. We're getting some great pricing from Jamf for it. But then we maintain that relationship. We are paying for the Jamf Cloud Premium, so we do have that. Ray maintains it as well as another person. And then our platform is owned and maintained by ourselves. and we have a partner in our College of Arts and Sciences. They're our biggest user. They actually, again, have more Apple devices than we do that we manage between those. So again, some of the largest units came over and started to work with us, both arts and sciences. Ray actually came from our College of Engineering. One thing I do great is go find other people and have them come work for me. So I pulled Ray from our College of Engineering.
And the key piece that Marty kind of glossed over to call out is that we don't charge anything extra to manage the platform. So what Jamf charges us per device, we charge back to the unit. So they're effectively getting me for free. And as Marty had mentioned, I wrote a Python script, and there's a link in the GitHub. I'll make sure these slides get shared out as well. But rather than going site by site and clicking on show inventory and seeing how many devices are in each site, I've written a script that pulls each site. And this is just a snippet of kind of it's way longer than this because there's obviously authentication and everything in it as well. But I pull all of the site counts. The one piece that I don't love is that the new Jamf Pro API limits you to 100 or 1,500 to 2,000 devices. I can't remember the exact number per page that you get through the RSQL. And we have a couple units that are in the 2,500 plus range. So my quick and dirty way was just to loop roughly the amount of times that I need to get because I know roughly what the device count is, but I need to know exactly. So I just said, oh, just loop through this and increment the page 2 or 3 times, and I get all of them. So this is very new. It used to be a manual process of going site by site and exporting CSV, or just seeing what all the computers and all mobile devices counts were. Because even though Jamf splits out Apple TV, I do have to split mobile devices and Apple TVs because those licenses are counted separately. And then Marty had mentioned there were some early challenges. There were some roadblocks. And it was a bumpy road. The move from on-premises to cloud was rocky. It was content distribution was the big thing. It was moving all of the packages from on-premises to cloud. I know that seems like it's always somewhat of a problem, especially with the JCDS 2.0 changes that package content is still a challenge, but that was the biggest one. That we went to the cloud and all of the policies were empty because the packages didn't move along with it. So there was a lot of manual downloading and re-uploading that had to be done. But the bigger problem that we ran into was the shared service didn't have a lot of sharing. Every site had the same kinds of config profiles, policies. There was a lot of package and script duplication. We didn't really have a good mechanism to share ideas amongst the site admins. And a lot of this even led to performance issues with our Jamf instance. That there were support tickets open that, hey, your database, you have these policies that are running that are hammering it because it's running continuously and there's no way the devices are getting pulled out. Jamf has some of these things built in as protections now that you can't create a policy that is ongoing, deploying a package to all computers, things like that, but those things were happening. So these are some of the early challenges that we had to overcome. Basically, our approach wasn't right from the beginning to silo everything. So my predecessor worked with all of the site admins, including me as one of the customers, to make some top-level changes. We removed a lot of duplication of the most common config profiles and some of the self-service policies as well. So it was an improvement on performance, but it also meant that you didn't have things being done 18 times, especially if some of it had to come from the top. There might have been one of them being a Jamf Connect license key, that we have other units that are using Connect. Rather than me update a license key in 11 different places, I update it in 1. So self-service applications, a lot of them were moved to the top. And we added custom triggers so that people can, instead of having a separate policy with another package in it when they're doing deployments, they could just call the custom trigger in their dep notify script or something to install that application during enrollment. We did a lot of common configuration profiles. We added our CrowdStrike PPPCs and system extensions and notification settings. Same goes with Microsoft, Cisco Secure Client for VPN, Beyond Trust remote support, Symantec DLP, and a lot of other common PPPCs and system extensions, kernel extensions that we basically asked, or they asked us as the site admins, what do you want and were surprised to come back and say, or they came up with a list first and said, here's what we were thinking. And then everybody else said, well, why don't you also add this? They were really surprised that people wanted this taken off their hands. So the list is pretty long of things that are at the top level now. But there was also the issue with identity. So as shared Jamf model, as the Apple experts, that we were one of the biggest units. What do? Some people were using Nomad. Some people were using AD binding, as you can see in how I feel about that in the slide here. We were using Centrify as an AD plugin, but were these the best options? And I put in parenthetical here. Somebody in the Q&A, please ask Marty about Enterprise Connect, please. He loves Apple so much about that, so please ask him about that. So we decided on Jamf Connect. So this was during COVID, zero-touch deployments. You don't have access to on-premises resources. So we landed on Jamf Connect to manage identities. And as our department, we were going this way, but hey, if anybody else wants to buy in, just like with Shared Jamf, we will just give us the amount of devices you have. We'll buy the licenses, give you the license key. And with the identity management piece, the IDP piece, we will also go a step further, and you'll just use our configuration for that piece. You can customize the menus and the other behavior as much as you want, but we'll use a shared identity setup as well. So as of today, we use a custom ADFS web page because we have faculty and staff use name.number@osu.edu, students use @buckeyemail.osu.edu, and we have a branch campus that's a community college that uses Central Ohio Technical College at costc.edu. The JavaScript does some fancy work to just change that all to @osu.edu, but the users are able to still do what they're used to. So you don't have to say, hey students, use @buckeyemail.osu.edu everywhere except for on the Mac. They can just keep logging in the way they're used to, and the JavaScript figures it out. We are going to be moving to Enter ID with password hash synchronization. The configurations are built and everything, but we're waiting on, basically I was waiting for JNUC to talk to people about privilege escalation in Jamf Connect and then just do it all at once. Prior to this would have been April of 2022, there were separate configurations, so you couldn't have mixed use devices. You either had a faculty staff device or a student device, not both, until this custom page was built. And in January 2022 is when I moved over from College of Engineering to this position now, and there have been a lot of changes since then. More top-level configurations, so the Jamf Connect pieces, more policies were moved to the top. The big project, though, was 802.1x device authentication, and I'm going to talk a decent amount in the next few slides about this. Initially, our department were the only ones that were doing it, but our networking team, for a few different reasons, we have a shared research center at Ohio State now that has collaborative research where people from medical center, engineering, arts, and sciences all come together and can collaboratively research. There were use cases for restricted networks and limiting the access. And then our networking team also wanted to get rid of our on-campus SSID, OSU Wireless, and just move to EDU Roam. So combining all of these things, we moved to 802.1x device authentication and provided that as a top-level profile to everybody. And I will mention, it's not in the slides, but I will mention we are using Aruba ClearPass in a way that does not, the MAC address randomization in Sequoia is not a problem for us because of the way we've built that out. I do have a slide mentioning that, but it doesn't specifically call out why. And then the last piece is that a lot of useful extension attributes. So our 802.1x certificate authentication, this is my understanding of how the Aruba Jamf extension works. And we're using Aruba ClearPass with the Jamf extension that Jamf Pro kicks off webhooks to a cloud service that then informs Aruba ClearPass about a newly enrolled device or an inventory update that's been done on a device. So that puts that device in Aruba ClearPass's inventory so that when a device authenticates with a certificate, ClearPass is aware of it and authorizes it. We use Jamf ADCS connector for the certificate, so there's no AD binding involved. This is just Jamf's documentation on how we have a load balancer in the middle of it. So this is the DMZ load balancer chart for that. So it's a single configuration profile for wired and wireless, and then all mobile devices also have a wireless profile. Wireless is configured for edge roam. The certificate CN is of the format Jamf variable $serial number at jamf.it.osu.edu. But the reason the MAC address doesn't matter is because I add a SAN to that cert that's just the serial number. And then the networking team indexes the serial number in the endpoint repository of ClearPass rather than the MAC address. So they had to write some custom SQL for the authentication to make this work. But MAC address randomization is not a problem because of this setup. I'd mentioned also that we do provide API accounts to sites, so I wanted to kind of talk about how we've done some things in the API, because I know a lot of units sometimes are scared of scripting and APIs and stuff, so I wanted to show that even in a unique setup such as ours, that the API can be used in a safe way. Extension attributes, we do use these a lot. So these are just some examples that I've pulled. I've seen in the Mac admin Slack of units that have way more, somewhere upwards of 250 extension attributes. We're not nearly at that number, but a lot of these extension attributes are blank text fields that are to be used by different API integrations to populate these fields. You can see CrowdStrike and Nessus and sort of these sorts of things are scripts in Jamf that are pulling directly from the client. But I'll show on the next slide how we have some external integrations as well. But I do want to say be careful with the API as far as what you actually write into the API. We had an extension attribute, or extension attributes rather. We had an extension attribute listing every 32-bit app that was installed on a device back in the High Sierra Mojave days. That's a lot for your databases when you have thousands of computers that all have that. You know, it's good to have a lot of them, but be careful, be brief in what gets reported. That's a top tip that bit us the hard way. We use ServiceNow for our ITSM, our CMDB. We don't use ServiceNow's Jamf app to interface with Jamf. We actually did a custom setup with Apache Airflow, where Python scripts and some automation are interfaced with Jamf. We pull in Tenable Nessus, we pull in information from CrowdStrike. And what this allows us to do is let ServiceNow be the authoritative source on a device's health. So if a device isn't checking into Jamf, but it's checking into CrowdStrike or Nessus, we can see that, okay, that device needs to be remediated, because if we were just depending on Jamf, then according to Jamf, it's not working at all in Nessus or CrowdStrike either, but you go look at ServiceNow, the last established date for CrowdStrike is today, but it hasn't talked to Jamf in a week, then you know there's a problem. So ServiceNow is our authoritative source. Marty had mentioned the College of Arts and Sciences. They do something similar with Team Dynamics. They call it a JSS API worker server that runs Python scripts with Flask that do a lot of these similar automations. And then these are a lot of the things that we use ServiceNow for. So we use it for people requesting local admin access. So, and then SAP Privileges is the tool that we use in our department. A lot of other units have established the same thing. Network authorization roles. So the CI use case for the device, is it a single user device? Is it a computer lab device? Is it a research device? Puts the device into a smart group, because this writes back to an extension attribute to say, is this a public device? Is this a standard device? Is this a restricted device? So then when that Aruba ClearPass extension goes and pulls a device after it does an inventory update, one of the things that it gets is its group memberships. So we just have 3 smart groups at the top level of Jamf for those 3 network roles, and that's how it gets its authorization to one of those 3 tiers. One of the things we're going to be moving to is software update waves. So we're going to be using Nudge 2.0 to do a test wave, a pilot wave, and a production wave. Setting the waves will just be in the CI, so you can go back into ServiceNow and say, Is this a pilot device? Does this device have an exception where it's not going to be patched automatically? Because we do have a few of those. So is it a non-standard device? All of that will be driven from ServiceNow and fed into Jamf, and then Jamf just, with smart groups and scoping, automates everything else. And then certain things like inventory information. Asset tags are populated from ServiceNow, the assigned user, and even the status, because we found devices that have been marked as yet to be deployed or retired or something still in Jamf. So that kind of helps inform our Jamf cleanup as well. So looking forward to some of the things that I have planned for the service is moving more of the Jamf Connect configuration profiles to the top level. Right now, just the license key is, and the IDP settings are still at the site levels. What we want to do is move the IDP settings to the top, and then people would just configure the rest of the settings, the behavior at the site level. More automation. One of the things I would like to leverage more of the Jamf app catalog in the self-service policies, because Jamf now has the functionality that if you have it deployed as self-service, but a user has that application installed, it will still patch it. You don't have to use the app catalog as the mechanism to get into or get that app installed. It will detect that it already had Chrome or already had Firefox and keep it up to date that way. We also use Installator now for those self-service policies instead of just uploading packages. That's even replacing auto package automations as well to keep some packages up to date. We want to document best practices for our site admins because there's a varied level of expertise. There's some that have dedicated Apple guys on their teams, some where it's a Windows crew that had Apple devices thrown into their laps and told you have to manage these things. So we want to document the ways that have worked for us, take some of the things even in this presentation and share them out with more detail so that we've had some turnover in some units as well where nobody on the team is left from when they onboarded onto the shared Jamf service, so they have no idea how this works. A better package lifecycle. Some of that's solved with App Catalog and Installator, but we do have a lot of cruft, a lot of old packages, like 60 different Zoom installers in there that just need to be cleaned up. And one thing that I'll mention on the next slide is about package naming as well. And then more frequent auditing of the access in Jamf. We have seen, especially with that turnover in those sites, a lot of people who have left to go to different departments that still have access to the old site they were in. So building the best practices, we give our site admins shared the full reign, but these are some considerations that we tell them. Configuration profiles that are going to be used by everyone, most likely at the top, so you don't need to create another CrowdStrike profile. It's most likely already there. Come to me if you're not sure, but I do have a list of things in a Teams channel that all of our admins are in that are at the top level so that they know. The big problem we've had are people have, we tell people to prefix their packages with their unit name, a 3-character unit name, but only if there's a reason and nobody else should use it. And we still have some units that are doing it regardless of if they've customized it or not. So we'd like to see less of that. The don't deploy bad policies thing, still have that on occasion, but for the most part, Jamf protects the user, the admins from being able to do this, but there's still ways to do it. And then extension attributes go through me because there's no way to scope them to just your site, so I need to make sure they're not going to affect anybody else. This next slide is my personal Jamf wish list because we use sites so heavily, and there's probably 100 other things I can add to this. I would love to see sites as an indexed value in the inventory records so that we could scope directly to sites. Our workaround right now is that we actually run a script to pull all of the inventory records of all the computers and write that back to an extension attribute that just says what site the device is in. Lapse is not, the Jamf lapse is for everybody. There's no way to just enable it just for sites. So that doesn't work in this model because we're not trying to prescribe things to people. We just provide the platform and let them do it. So I can't turn it on for me without turning it on for everybody else. Same goes with device compliance. Like I had mentioned, there were some rogue medical center units that came over into the shared Jamf. They're in a different IDP than we are. They have a different M365 tenant. So they can't use device compliance and the rest of the university also use it. with the way that Jamf is built right now. And then this is one that I've thought of that would be a nice to have, but maybe not necessarily need to have, is dynamic group scope. I would love to create top-level smart groups that encompass maybe Mac OS version, or that, especially for determining if a device supports the latest Mac OS or latest iOS. I'd love to create a single smart group for each of those at the top level, but allow the site admins to scope them, and it only pull the devices from that smart group that are in that site. So that because right now, that's one of the things that I can't do. I can't simplify and go to just the top level. Each unit has to have, doesn't support Ventura, doesn't support Sonoma, doesn't support Sequoia, over and over, where if I could do it for them, it would be great. And just wanted to mention that this is something that we've had the opportunity to share with other universities. This is just a small list of universities that we've met with in the past that have been able to learn from this and improve upon it. So if you see any other of these universities that present on Jamf, they've probably taken what we've had, gone through similar bumps, or learned from our mistakes and been able to improve on it. So this is just one of the things we want to make sure we do is collaborate. And because, as was mentioned in the keynote, this is such a great community. People love sharing and helping out. So that's the reason why we're here. All right, thank you. Any questions?
Hey, we're going to open up for Q&A. We'll start right over here. I'm going to pass you to Mike.
Hey, my name's Everett Allen. I'm from North Carolina State University in Raleigh, North Carolina. Thanks for putting this on. We've been doing sites like you guys have been doing, except across multiple universities in our UNC 17 system for about 8 years now. So if Jamf people are listening, they should know that we echo that same list of wants for sites here. One of the things I was really curious about, though, you mentioned you had a role in Apple School Manager that would keep people from releasing devices. As far as I can see, is if you're a device manager, you can release a device. So if you know a role that stops that, that would be great. Because if you can claim them, you can release them.
So I think I'll have to check to be sure, but I'm pretty sure only the administrator role could do releasing. The device.
I can assure you device managers can release devices.
Or we've just scared enough people
There's a
not to do it.
possibility that we've customized it. We might have turned that off. There might be a way to actually uncheck that option.
Yeah, that'd be.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
So maybe that might have been what we might have turned off, the ability to do that for the device enrollment manager piece, and only administrators can do that.
That's great. I'll look into that.
Yeah.
The other thing I'll mention to you, we just released a Swift app into the App Store called Citer, S-I-T capital R, S-I-T-E capital R. It pulls the counts by site into a spreadsheet-like thing, and it also taps some of the other endpoint APIs for lookups and counts. So it's out there for free. If you download it, it might help you out.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Awesome. I see a question up here in the front.
So you mentioned being able to give site admins the ability to, pardon me, upload packages and scripts. I've not found a way to do that. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit on how you accomplish that?
Yeah, so that's all in the SAML claims for our SSO setup using Shibboleth. So I have the Shibboleth group as a Jamf group that's basically we have customized Jamf URL. So we have jamf.service.osu.edu/SAML/metadata/group name. So as long as the user is in those groups, the access can be kind of pieced together. So we have a site administrator group, so we have the site name or Jamf-site name-admin, and anybody who has that role in GMS also gets added to a Jamf admin package or a few other groups that's a top-level setting, and then we just check the options for them to be able to do the package uploads, script uploads, and things like that. So it's tying together the SAML claims, basically.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah.
Yep, and for anybody online, you could do that with LDAP groups. So. Okay, question right here.
I work at an organization that's still limping along with a lot of AD joins. So can I get your thoughts on using something like Nomad or Connect or maybe some of your trials and errors with that?
So can you say what the first part was there?
Yeah, so my organization still has a lot of AD joins for their Macs.
Oh, yeah.
So we're looking to probably move over to Connect or
Right.
one of those other type of solutions. So I'd
Yeah.
like to hear maybe your experience with maybe moving off of AD joins if you ever had that, or just
So-
using the other ones in general.
So I just moved computer labs. We have shared devices that were Active Directory joined. We moved them to Connect. And the Connect configuration is exactly the same as the one-to-one, except for file vault enablement. So that's really the only hang up, is just make sure file vault doesn't get enabled. Using something like Nomad, especially for a computer lab that's always going to be on premises, so you're always going to have able to connect back to a domain controller, that's always an option. I think that's a use case that Active Directory bindings people are going to be holding on to for dear life for shared devices. As far as one-to-one, because everything's so mobile and the way our zero-touch deployment is configured, to be able to just send a device home and they don't have to have line of sight back to a DC, the Connect is really good for those sorts of use cases, or Xcreds or some other IDP, cloud IDP option, platform SSO, things like that. So we use Connect and have been leveraging it heavily. We're moving all of our computer labs that way. Other units have been able to do that as well. We actually have an enhancement in with Jamf on Connect because it's not playing well with our 802.1x wired, in that it's showing a message that it's not connected to the internet even though it is. It's just not checking after the connection's established. So people will walk up to it and say, oh, this computer's broken, when it's not. It'll log in at the Jamf Connect login window, but the user doesn't know that it's just ephemeral.
Yeah, and we were going to look at we started looking at platform SSO, but then the same time they were announcing platform SSO, Jamf Connect added in admin privileges, which is now what we're looking at, especially with Entra. We looked at, and this was the one Ray wanted me to talk about, Enterprise Connect, right? I paid the money to Apple. We did the engagement. We're moving off of it. Ready to hit send on an email and went, oh, we deprecated that. That's going away. So we had to completely change course. And it was one of those things that Apple's always fun with us, right? And this is where Jamf, I'm here to say that, but Jamf really helps with this. Is it helps us succeed, but it helps us also just stay alive at times for what Apple does to all of us, right? Where they don't tell us things. Our second year of deploying iPads, we were set to buy 12,000 iPad Pros, and we were ready to hit submit on an order, and they said, we're going away with that model. You get an Air now. And we're like, what's that Air even do? But that's, I think, one of the biggest things for Jamf then was we immediately pivoted. I yelled at Apple a few times as far as, well, you paid for the engagement with us, not for the product. Okay. But then we ended up pivoting and going with Jamf Connect, and it's been fantastic for us, when we pivoted away to that. But yeah, that was my little story about how Enterprise Connect and Apple upset me. Was I gave them my money, we spent the time building it out, we had it all ready, and we're like, great, this will replace it, to your question.
Yeah.
Enterprise Connect will replace it, and they went, we don't want to do this anymore. Jamf's got something. Nomad's got something at the time, and so we pivoted away and went to a product. So we're still looking at platform SSO possibly, but with the addition of possibly getting rid of privileges and having that all built in, we're probably going to stay with Jamf Connect then.
And honestly, I think a lot of it comes down to, Apple's never going to give you a definitive date on this, but the writing's on the wall that you're not going to be able to bind anymore, so we're trying to get ahead of it. There's still units at Ohio State that use Nomad. There's still units that e-bind. Some units don't do any identity management. Just you have a local account on your Mac and you have a separate password on your Mac than you do everything else. So we're going fully into Jamf Connect, Microsoft single sign-on extension, any of that can simplify things for the users. But a lot of it's just get out ahead before Apple rips out that option for you.
And for anybody attending here in person, the Braindate platform, Sean Rabbit, he has multiple opportunities for you to meet with him and have a brain date. If you're interested in learning more about Jamf Connect, or if you should use platform SSO and what are the benefits and how do they outweigh one another. So definitely take a look at that in your app if that's something that you have more questions on.
His privilege elevation brain date's part of the reason that I've held off on deploying it in the first place.
Cool, we got about 5 minutes left. Do we have any additional questions? Yep, cool.
Hey guys, Steve Johnson with Texas A&M.
Yeah.
Good to see you guys again.
Yeah.
So it sounds like y'all are kind of operating your ASM similar to how we're doing, right? We're the only ones that can release, but we do have shared Jamf admins, operating in our console. How do y'all? We're finding it a bit of a struggle where they request a device to be released. We have some engineering departments that, as part of their tuition, the students get it, and when they graduate, we release it.
Yeah.
But until then, they're still A&M property.
Right.
So there's a little bit of, we ask them to verify, did this student graduate? Because the implications of releasing the device are pretty drastic. So I just kind of want to ask y'all, how do you guys validate, or is it, what do you guys do?
Well, the one that's the easiest is, our asset management process. We do have a centralized surplus department. So when they ask, making it part of their process, getting them to do it more, we're not getting there as much as we'd like to. We do have some students, the same one. We ask them to verify, but it's very much a verify it, ask again. Some of the most interesting ones are the things think would be most secure. We've had our med center and the researchers be like, no, I bought that with my grant. How many times has everybody heard that? I bought that with my grant, it's mine. That's still the university's money, right? But I bought that with my grant, it's mine. And, finding those. And one of the new things that Apple School Manager is now doing in Jamf, they get bit then later because of that profile that Ray talked about.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden their machine's bricked and they're mad.
Yeah.
They're really mad. But it's like, well, your device was never managed. Well, it's mine. No. So, a lot of those great compliance conversations and privacy get to be had a lot of times after the fact.
Yeah.
But we've also seen the same thing of our surplus department not getting rid of or not talking to us. And then you got to manage a device with things like names that you wouldn't want to see, and possibly the university is managing a device that you don't want to be managing. One we had was called Dollhouse, and we're not certain what that dollhouse was.
It might be a gentleman's club.
Yeah, it might be that. Might be hopefully a kid's thing. But, that one had gotten there and was being managed by the university because we didn't have the right offboarding process. So that's something we're still struggling with as well.
And recently, so our iPad count is as high as it is because we did go away from the one-to-one program, but we have a device loaner program for students who are in need. Or because of the digital flagship, certain classes were restructured to leverage the iPads. So if you're enrolled in that class, you're able to loan one of those out. A lot of work was done between student enrollment and the ServiceNow team to get that information ingested as well. So we're thankful and lucky to have dedicated ServiceNow engineers that work for our department to be able to work on those sorts of things. That's why we would use custom integrations rather than just using the built-in apps and things like that.
Hi, thanks for sharing the slide with your, peers and the people that you've been working with. As somebody that is one of these non-centralized instances, can you talk a little bit more about the process you went through to kind of bring those under the fold and what those relationships were or conversations were like to kind of say, now you're part of the bigger version?
It's kind of, it was surprising and shocking that this wasn't a mandate for us. And so I think one of the biggest things was relationships, as you said, building relationships. Yeah. I like to say I probably will live at Ohio State and die at Ohio State. I started as a student many years ago, 1997, worked up as a student. I have a lot of relationships, and I was surprised. I was honestly surprised the amount of groups that said, yeah, I'll move over to your server.
Yeah.
And Ray can share kind of the process because he was also part of moving a group over. It's harder than when we did it, and Ray can share some of that, but it really became a collaborative environment. We're actually going the same way on our, naughty word here, but our Windows platform. We're going that same model of that shared development. But I know it was with a quick add package. It really worked. And I think one of the things is Apple engineers, all of you that do this, it's more something that people want to do, because I got plenty of Windows people who's like, oh, I'm Windows. You put an Apple in front of them, they're scared. Like, I don't touch that thing. Yeah. And so providing it and going, all I'm going to do now is do this, and everything, the platform is handled, really I didn't really have a lot of arguments. Yeah. People just said, oh, cool, we'll go do that. We'll move over. And then it kind of, it went from that of you have everything, we broke some things with that, to you'll do that for me? Well, will you do this too? Will you do this now? Will you add this profile? And so it kind of just built up from that of building that trust. And I think that was the biggest thing we had to do was provide that trust that I don't need more work. I don't want to do your work. So, take what we'll give you, and then it's been built upon. So I would say it was a trust factor more than anything.
It's also going to units that have their Casper server on an aging Mac Pro and a couple Mac Minis and saying, hey, do you want to take this in the cloud and you don't have to pay anything extra for it? And I go, yeah, absolutely. Please, I don't want to manage this absolute mess of a configuration.
Well, and one other thing we were able to do was, everybody remembers the startup costs, right? Those jump starts. And those departments that couldn't afford a jump start. I got 50 Macs. I got a few iPads. I need to manage these things, but I'm not going to pay all of that. And I can't afford to maintain the platform. It was something we were then able to provide to them and then onboard them very cost effectively and provide that service to them.
Great. What a super informative session, Marty and Ray. How about a round of applause for these guys?
Thank you, everyone.
I'm sure you guys are probably going to hang around for some offline questions, but if somebody needs to get a hold of you here at JNUC or after the fact, how can somebody get a hold of you guys?
Well, you can find us here. We'll be here.
Yeah,
but then my email, winders.1, osu.edu, demay.9. Yeah, put your first slide.
Cool. Awesome.
We'll also be at bars, I'm sure. Doing one tonight. There's an EDU cab, I think, or an EDU party. So
awesome. Well, if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you, everybody. There's refreshments out in the hall, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon.